In this video, we're going to show you how to install the rear wheel hub on your Dodge Charger located behind your rear wheels. Using a 22mm socket, loosen and remove the lug nuts. Grab the wheel and remove it, set it aside. We're going to remove our caliper and bracket at the same time by removing the two 18mm bolts holding it. There's one here, one straight up above. I'm going to use a standard 18mm socket and a ratchet. Remove that bolt, set it aside. Before we remove that upper bolt, you want to make sure you have some sort of anchoring or securing strap or hook. We want to go ahead and hold the caliper and bracket up. We don't want it to hang and pull on the flex hose. So have that ready to go. Now when you remove the caliper and bracket, the brake rotor is going to be loose and free, so be careful not to drop that. Got to remove that bolt. Slide this off. It's going to come off with the brake pads as well. Now I have the hook supporting off of this sway bar through the hole in the bracket, holding the caliper and bracket aside. Using a 32mm socket, loosen and remove the axle nut. Go ahead and grab your brake rotor, slide that off and set that aside. Now our wheel hub itself is going to have to pull out, and you want to go ahead and push on that axle shaft. Now if it's stuck, let's go ahead and start to loosen that up. We're going to put some rust penetrant in here, let that soak in a little bit. You can also work on this by applying a punch in the center here. And we're going to see that that is moving a little bit. It's broken free. So you can see that shaft moving in a little bit. So that's perfect. Now in the back here, I'm applying a little bit of rust penetrant on the hub flange. Now I don't want to soak it because I don't want to contaminate our e-brake shoes, but you do want to go ahead and make sure that we get around that hub flange itself. On the back side of our knuckle here, right where the CV axle goes through, there's going to be 4 inverted Torx bit bolts. They're number 12. The longer extension here is going to be used for the 2 forward ones. Here we go. Go ahead and get that top one here. Let's go ahead and move to the rearward too. Now the upper one is just beside the ABS speed sensor here, so just kind of move inward right above the axle. And this is where we transition into the shorter extension. That way we have clearance between the shock and this unit. Now if you don't have a shorter extension, you will have to remove the shock to do that. And then we have our lower one over here, just a little bit below the upper one, using that short extension. Now all 4 of the bolts have been unthreaded from the hub. You do not have to remove them from the back at this point here, but we can go ahead and pull the hub out from the front side. Here's our wheel hub. And we're going to apply a little bit of anti-seize compound to the splines here on our CV axle. Now some of these hub flanges here, if you look at them, you'll notice that some of these are more narrow at one end and wider on another portion. So you want to be careful, pay attention to something like that, whether it's this car or any other car you're replacing a hub on. Now you may have to rotate the hub flange itself to get around the parking brake, and then rotate that axle, and you want to push this back. Now what I'm doing is I'm reaching around the back side of the backing plate, and I'm going to grab one of those bolts, and I want to start it by hand first. You might have to use the socket and extension, whatever's easier for you, but you definitely want to get these started by hand and not cross thread them. So now that we have all four of these started, we'll go ahead and get our ratchet on here, and we want to snug them all down. Once we snug all these down, we can then go ahead and torque them into place. Torque down our hub bolts to 74 foot-pounds. Install the axle nut, and we'll snug that down. Now we're going to spray down our hub face with a little bit of anti-seize compound. You want to protect those e-brakes components. Grab your brake rotor. Go ahead and slide that into place. Grab your brake caliper and bracket and you can remove the hanger. You're probably going to have to slide the brake pads back into position. Slide the pads over the rotor. Now at this point here, we're going to reuse these bolts here. However, Dodge does recommend that you replace these bolts and then torque them down. Once we have that upper bolt started, we can go ahead and do the bottom. I like to do the top bolt first, because that way there I can let go of the caliper and the bracket and just pivot that component around to get that lower bolt started. I'm going to thread these in as far as I can by hand. Go ahead and snug these down. Go ahead and torque these down to 81 foot-pounds. Now I'm going to install two lug nuts, and they're going to be side by side. Go ahead and thread those down. I'm going to use a pry bar here, and the reason that we put the lug nuts on is that we want to protect the studs when we go to torque the nut here. Let's go ahead and torque down our axle nut to 157 foot-pounds. Remove the lug nuts. Go ahead and grab your wheel, Set that into place. I'm going to go ahead and install all of our lug nuts. Thread them all, and then we'll go ahead and snug them down. Torque down your lug nuts to 130 foot-pounds. We're going to do this in a crisscross pattern.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.